We're going to kick off with the final panel as our speakers head up to the stage. But thanks for sticking around. And this is, I think, the session that I'm most excited about. And not just saying that because I'm chairing it, but we're going to be looking at the future of robotic and automation technologies, what they mean for the UK, and crucially, how they'll be a driver of growth and productivity in the years to come. And we've got a really fantastic panel, and I think we really have saved the best till last. So I'm going to quickly introduce, or let our speakers introduce themselves, and then we're essentially going to be looking at what are the robotic and automation technologies that we should be interested in. We'll ask how the UK is currently leading or otherwise in the development, application, and commercialization of these. We'll be looking at what government and industry can do to make this a success. And I think we've got quite a diverse range of speakers and kind of parts of the sectors that they represent, so really excited about it. Final thing to mention before we kick off is that techUK in January, February-ish time is launching a 6 to 8 month campaign exploring the future of robotic and automation technologies, and again, what they mean for the UK, and through all sorts of workshops, roundtables, panel discussions, tech demos, summits, and a big report to come at the end of that. So if you'd like to find out more, check out our Innovation Hub or connect with me on LinkedIn, Rory Daniels 28. And I can start by introducing myself. I'm Rory Daniels, techUK's Senior Program Manager for Emerging Technologies, of which robotics and automation are a growing and important area of interest for techUK. So I'm going to just pass the virtual mic down the panel, and if our speakers just 10 or 20 seconds introduce themselves, and then we can launch into the discussion. So, Steve.
Good afternoon all. I'm Steve McLaren. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of the National Robotarium. Yes, I have got a title with Robotarium in it, and it's pretty cool. I really like that. What do we do? Well, we're based up in Edinburgh. We've got national in our title because we're UK and not just Scottish. So I'm not a reincarnation of William Wallace. We're here for the UK benefit. We're a bit of a melting pot. So we do research, we do adoption, we focus on talent, and we also support entrepreneurship. So just to give you the idea of all of that in one melting pot is to create pathways right the way through from the youngest students all the way through to the entrepreneurs and onto commercial adoption.
Fantastic, thanks. Agnes.
Hi everyone, I'm Agnes Omagui. I'm the robotics lead at Innovate UK Business Connect, which is a support partner for Innovate UK, and it's one of the UKRI councils. For those who don't know what Business Connect does, it's in the name. We connect businesses to academia, to industry, to government, to anything to support business development in the UK.
Thanks, David.
Hi everybody, my name is David Hewitt. I'm a director at IBM in the UK and Ireland, and I run the automation business, and we are focused on enterprise IT, so we're B2B, so that there is an interesting panel here on all ends of the spectrum on terms of where automation gets deployed. We're focused on 50% of the 5350 to deploy automated technologies to help them be more productive.
Fantastic. And James.
Yeah, hi, I'm James Humphreys. I'm the head of engineering at Ocado Technology, focusing primarily on robotic handling, so automation through robotics. Ocado Technology is the technology arm of Ocado Retail, so we build grocery picking, packing, and delivery technology and sell it to retailers all over the world.
Brilliant. So I'm going to kick us off by, as I said, asking just what are the key robotic and automation technologies. So maybe James, I'll start with you. And Ocado does, a huge range of robotics, from grid robotics to cutting-edge ML-driven systems. Can you just talk us through some of the kind of basic types of technologies we're talking about here?
Sure, it's a great opportunity to kind of show off, I suppose. So I guess there's two key bits of technology. One is our automated retrieval and storage and retrieval service, which is essentially a massive grid inside a warehouse with a bunch of retrieval robots that run along the top that can pick up totes or containers of groceries and move them to anywhere else in the warehouse completely autonomously. They are then kind of brought to a manual picker who then does the final pick, all of which is controlled by a kind of air traffic control system, I guess, completely automated, that has very sophisticated optimization technology to kind of keep the system humming very well. But as I mentioned, although this has been massively successful, this is kind of the first phase of automation, and our next phase of automation, I suppose, is to look at that manual pick stage, right? So the one bit that we could never automate that was extraordinarily tough, and I think has been tough for everybody, is a kind of each picking. So when the groceries come to an actual person and you have to pick it up and pick up an individual item and put it into a tote for delivery, which sounds simple, but the variety of items that you're picking is absolutely immense, right? It's a hugely complicated task and kind of known to be one of the most difficult things in robotics. And that's what we're now tackling. So that is the department I look after. We have now mounted a series of 6 degree of freedom robots on top of the grid, and they have a suction cup, and they use cameras and sensors and a bunch of very advanced ML, of which we have, for example, behavior cloning and reinforcement learning, to actually learn how to pick and pack groceries completely autonomously. And it's gone from being like a research project, and I've seen it go from research project to being delivered at scale, and now is very much in the growth phase. So very, very successful and massively exciting.
Absolutely, brilliant. And so I'm going to, Agnes, ask you about, so James mentioned AI and the convergence between robotic technologies and AI. I understand you developed a kind of robotics and AI landscape map on behalf of the sector. Are you able to just explain to us what that convergence looks like in practice?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, I would say the conversion would be looking at collaborative robots. If you use collaborative robot as an example, these are robots that are designed with sensors that work alongside human, and this can also look at how AI is being integrated into them, and they're integrated into them with machine vision and deep learning algorithms as well. And again, this is looking at how robots are converged into characteristics such as adaptability. How are they deployed in different industries? The scalability element, how a business can start small by developing a robot, and then they can scale up based on the needs and the budget of the robot. And then you've also got data-driven optimization, which is looking at AI analytics that provide insights for processes and improvement. So for me, it's looking at, if you look at those key 3 characteristics, it's looking at how these technologies can be converged into environments where complex workflows, high efficiency, and rapid adaptability is essential. And you can see this in the RAI landscape map, that this is within the sectors such as manufacturing and logistics, healthcare and pharmaceutical production, as well as construction and infrastructure management, and retail and customer services.
Okay, very interesting. And I'd like to ask a bit later on, I think, just where the UK is on all of this. So that's good to know. Steve, I'm going to come to you. I understand that you have lots of startups and entrepreneurs within your building working on all sorts of challenges around these technologies. Are you able to just explain just what sort of challenges and technologies they
sure.
work on?
There's actually 12 startup companies that live in the building with us, and most of them have come from spin-outs from local universities, further away universities. Some are even ex-employees. And they're working on a range of sort of challenges, just picking up what James mentioned there about dexterity and being able to pick and identify specific things.
Yeah.
That's one of the biggest problems with robotics, is having that dexterity to pick things that are a bit more fragile, or you need to not drop them when you pick them up, but also recognizing in various different environments what the actual object is. So things like lights out automation is very important. That offers productivity increases. So the companies are working on things like that in various sectors. So for instance, we've got a company working on robotic recycling, uses visual systems with AI algorithms to recognize the type of rubbish on the conveyor belt, and then uses different types of grippers and manipulators to actually sort that out, put it into different bags. Yep. We can follow that through to things like agriculture as well. We've got companies working on the dexterity element, where they're looking for that haptic feedback through to a pair of gloves, actually feeling what you're picking up. So a whole array of both problem statements and research happening side by side.
Sure. Okay, brilliant. And we'll come on to the role between, commercializing research essentially and taking it from the lab to the real world in a little bit, but that's good to know. David, before we move on to the next section, I want to get your take on, we're talking about productivity and the huge gains that the UK could potentially realise were we to adopt more of these technologies. So I understand IBM have a very economics-driven model behind all of this. Can you explain a little bit about that and how it relates to productivity?
Yeah. So again, if we think about the enterprise IT space and whether you've got an SME with 50 applications and less than 500 workloads, right through to a multinational with thousands of applications and hundreds of thousands of workloads. In the context of each of those organizations, they've got the same problem, which is the IT bill is significant. And that is the reality today. Everybody has an IT bill that needs to be scrutinized. And if you look back in the last 20 years, arguably since forever in IT, there was this black box mentality to what IT cost it was. Nobody understood it. It was a single line item in the annual report. Is £100 million spent on a certain project by the NHS or by HMRC or fill in the blank, and the ability to bring transparency, that just was not, that's just not what IT was. It never was, and everybody accepted it because we never knew any different. I would say in the last 5 years or so, there's been a lot of disruption around wanting to see transparency in IT cost. And so IBM have got quite big into this space around FinOps, around bringing transparency right down to the line item of what IT actually costs so that we can put the efficiencies back into those organizations. There's lots of examples, but National Grid's one particular example we can talk to. A few years ago, they wanted to save £70 million out of their cost of IT in 3 years, and not just to save cost for cost's sake, but for productivity's sake. And they've done that through lots of different ways. They've used total cost of ownership models in an automated fashion through the IBM FinOps platform to allow them to work out which of their thousands of applications don't actually bring any return on investment to National Grid, and they can decommission using financially backed data. Cloud spend a lot better understood in the industry. The inefficiencies of cloud spend, cloud sprawl has gone so quickly. We spun everything up. Everybody's turned all the radiators on in the house and all the windows are open, and it's quite a big problem. You would think it's quite easy to turn the radiators off again, but when you've got 100,000 workloads, the cost of actually looking for the inefficiencies manually is more than the saving you get by turning off the radiator. And so again, we've developed through our platform to automate that capability to be able to bring those cost savings through. When we talk about productivity and we talk about, again, in National Grid's example, to save £70 million, it's not about saving cost to just save cost. It's now being seen as a source of competitive advantage. So National Grid are worried that if they don't do it and their competitors do it, then their competitors have pumped £70 million into investment into their organization to grow, scale. So we've got into this space, I would say, really in the last 2 or 3 years. We started to get to this tipping point where people are looking over the shoulder saying more and more of their competitors are doing a thing. We're having to run down and catch up. We've got a group of the haves and the have-nots so start to form, which is good for innovation of the technology itself. But that's some examples of where productivity has really started to take form.
Yeah, sure. That's really interesting. I might want to come back to that point later, actually. I'm going to talk now more specifically about the UK. And James, I've got a question for you to kick this off. So Ocado Technology, as I understand it, is essentially about taking cutting-edge research and applying it at scale. How good is the UK at doing just that?
So I guess, I know it's been mentioned before, but I would definitely go back to the fantastic education system that we have. I think we get some of the best interns, graduates, and so on, and just talent coming into the organisation is amazing. So that's a really good it kind of feeds, I suppose, the skills pool in our organisation. But also, we have amazing partnerships with academic institutions. And I think one of the things I'd want to highlight actually would be, for us anyway, Horizon Europe, which was a EU-funded program for funding research and also creating partnerships between commercial entities and academic institutions. We've benefited massively from that. So we've had just recently we had 3 research programs funded who are now based with us in our labs, and we benefit in the sense that, of course, we're very close to the research. They benefit with access to labs equipment and just generally sharing a space. And I think it's just a really good example of how academia can work with private enterprise and just mutually benefit massively. Yeah, that's one of the core strengths, I think.
Sure, okay. And it's interesting you mention a pool of funding or a program that businesses can utilize. And Agnes, I'm keen to get your take on, we get a lot of emerging tech companies saying, well, there should be more government support in certain areas, but they also say that lots of the existing government support from the likes of Innovate UK is really fantastic, and we should scale up those programs. They're doing nothing wrong, just not at the scale that we kind of want. Can you give any examples of any programs focused on robotics specifically that look to boost productivity that companies within the UK should be looking at?
Absolutely. So we currently have the Made Smarter opportunity, which the government invested £147 million, and it was aimed at manufacturers or manufacturing businesses to adopt advanced technologies. This opportunity was launched in 2018, and it looked at promoting adoption of robotics, AI, IoT, and data analytics to boost productivity, reduce emissions, and increase competitiveness in the UK. As well as within Innovate UK, as David mentioned, we do have the knowledge transfer partnerships as well. This is a fantastic opportunities for those businesses that are looking to form partnerships with academia. So if you're an industry or in a business, you're doing your own research, for example, instead of just starting from scratch, there's a high chance of you to collaborate with an academia who's already done that research that's sitting on a desk. So that's highly, highly encouraged. As well as within the robotic field as well, I would mention that we've got a robotic growth partnership as well. This is a government-backed initiative to bring together leaders from industry, academia, and government to create a robotic strategy to advance robotics in the UK. They recently published, if you haven't had a look yet, they recently published a draft called the Smart Machine 2035 strategy, which looked at 4 key goals of robotics, which is looking at, for example, goal 1 was supplying, which is looking at how we can develop the existing ecosystems further. And then the other goal was demand, which is looking at how can we increase the driving and adoption uptake of robotics in the UK. And then we've got talent, which is the goal 3, which is looking at the research and skills within the UK. And goal 4, it's looking at how we can develop regulations of robotics within the UK. So this robotic growth partnership is not a direct funding program at the moment, but it's an advocate for policies and funding that support growth and development of robotics in the UK.
Okay, interesting, thanks. And so, Steve, I want to ask you, so one of those 4 goals being demand, do you think the UK is currently doing enough to meet the demand for robotics and automation technologies?
No, I think there's a reticence to adopt. So I think James is a good example of adoption and are really getting into it and getting into partnerships, working with academia and looking at where it can add value. But it's not, I would say, the majority of industry that's doing that. It's more of a minority, if I'm being honest, in terms of the ones that we hear from. So that lack of understanding what robotics and automation is, and more importantly, isn't, and what it can do, is something that needs to be understood, particularly in well-established legacy industries, I would suggest. Sure. Younger industries do tend to go straight for that. Where you've got factories that have been around for years, they're struggling to rip out infrastructure and go, where do I justify that cost? So getting them to focus on, well, it's productivity up, it's lights out, it's augmentation of your human workforce, not replacement, I think is the message that we need to get across, and we need to get that supportive message into those industries to say, look, we need you to start adopting to create that demand.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. I want to ask David a question about kind of where the UK's strengths lie when it comes to the development and adoption of these technologies. I mean, we're a bit of a unique UK use case in a way, I think, in that I think we've got the lowest productivity growth in the G7 for certain factors, and it's a real kind of puzzle as to how we kind of crack that. But is there anything that's particularly promising in the UK that you look to and think, well, that could be part of the solution that maybe we're not tapping into enough, or that this new government perhaps could focus more on?
Yeah, well, I don't think I've got a magic bullet, but I'll give it a go. And so we've heard from the last few comments made. I think it's really important to be honest about where we are. I think we could all big ourselves up, and the UK is brilliant at everything, and we're number 1. And I think you're referring to the business productivity index from the G7. The UK, I think, is 1 from the bottom in that index on its likelihood to adopt new technologies. And I think it was last on operational efficiency. So that's a data point. One of the things that I've enjoyed most about my career on service side, whether it's in large consulting firms or small, and I've been in both, but always in IT, is I get to do my own benchmarking. I get to meet lots of organizations and get the sense, is that really true what that report says, or what is the context behind that? And if you look back through what I'll oversimplify as the last two waves, in the 2000s we had virtualization took over the data center, and the UK dominated that growth. We went 2 feet into that, and there was no lack of adoption, so there was no issue at that phase. In the 2010s, then we arguably saw the real dominance of cloud being used in real anger in the enterprise space, and again, I think the UK jumped into that and drove that globally from the front. My opinion, we saw maybe by 2018, 2019, we saw some really complex cloud implementations fail. Cloud was continuing to evolve maybe so quickly, and the UK had jumped in so quickly to innovate that actually what we were trying to achieve, organizations were trying to achieve with cloud implementations, the technology had moved on so quickly that they got caught into complex programs. And I think since 2018-19, for the last 4 or 5 years, we've been unpicking those problems in cloud to get them right. And organizations have learned a lot around cloud in the last 5 years versus 2010 to 2018. But at the same time, this new wave of disruption in digital has come. And I think we're a little bit distracted, and unnecessarily so, to get those other things right in the cloud space. So, because when I think about, again, the lack of productivity and the lack of adoption, for every laggard that you could point to, I could point you to another organization that would blow your mind with what they're doing in terms of being at the front of adopting technology. Unilever, and they're fairly public on this, in 2020, start of 2022, end of 2021, made a commitment to get 100% out of the data center. And by the summer of last year, they had shut the doors on every data center that they owned. They're 100% cloud organization. An organization like Unilever. A few weeks ago, we had our own IBM event. We had 1,000 people talking about FinOps and other automation technologies. HSBC, EDF Energy, standing up talking about the very complex organizations completely adopting new innovations technologies. And interestingly in that, the organizations that were in the room that maybe are seen as the laggards were actually up at the end wanting to glean information from the companies that are doing it. So it's not a lack of wanting to do it. It's a complexity of where you want to get to actually get in there. And I think the final comment I would make is, in terms of where are the UK's strengths, is that we always do pull through. We may not be the front runners in this, and I think we've maybe bitten off more than we could chew with the cloud race, but that was the right thing to do. And once we get that sorted and repoint ourselves in terms of our capabilities, we'll get there.
Sure. Okay, nice optimistic note to end
Yep.
that point on. No, that's brilliant. And I think the key point that we've heard throughout today is kind of not trying to lead on everything, but picking winners based on the key strengths of the UK and that sort of thing. So brilliant. I'm going to turn now to what the UK government and industry can do to make the development and application of these technologies a success. So Agnes, you mentioned the Made Smarter industrial network.
Yeah.
I also want to ask for your opinion on the industrial strategy.
Yeah.
So the modern industrial strategy that this government has announced, a 10-year vision for UK industry that's currently kind of techUK is working on consulting our members right now as we speak to feed into that process. Automation technologies being one of the 4 key areas that it's initially exploring. So yeah, where does that come into this equation, and I take it it's welcomed?
Absolutely. So obviously the government is still looking at ways to advance research and development in robotics. And obviously they've published a green paper, and it's called Invest 2035 UK Modern Industrial Strategy. So I'll highly encourage people to read that as well. And this, in the paper, they mentioned that they're looking to engage in complex issues that are barriers to investment. And they mentioned things like technology adoption and research and development. And I'm only keep pointing this as the 2 main ones, but there's more written on the paper as well. And then they also mentioned that they're looking to do this in growth-driving sectors such as advanced manufacturing, digital technology, creative industries, defense, and many more. Again, for me, when I read the paper, digital technologies, robotics sits within digital technologies, but again, the government are still looking at subsectors within those growth-driving sectors as well. So I still think there's still elements where the government is still looking to understand more of how they can invest more in research and development, especially in robotics.
Sure. No, that makes sense. And for anyone here that's part of a techUK member company, then do get in touch with us and we can feed that into the shaping of the industrial strategy. Steve, I'm going to come to you. And one thing that we often hear, and I work across a wide range of emerging technologies, is the UK is a great place to start a business. But I think Lord Valence said earlier, there are UK started businesses, but they're not necessarily UK owned businesses, and a lot move overseas. Funding, we hear, being the biggest kind of driver behind that, and the kind of the valley of death that inhibits growth as these companies scale. So Steve, I just want to ask, how are you seeing some UK startups get across that valley of death? Are they doing so? And
well, yeah. So my limited experiences, I've watched some small success and I've watched some failures. Actually, I've watched 3 startup companies actually go out of business because they couldn't cross that valley into full commercialization. And I've watched some succeed, a couple succeed because they've attracted foreign investment, mainly from the US. In fact, some of the companies I deal with that manufacture robotics are now wholly owned by US companies. That sounds great, but it's actually not good for UK PLC because we've just lost a company to another country. What's to stop them going out there and actually manufacturing there where the market demand is? So I think we have 2 things. And there's a lack of market demand and market pull to adopt this technology, and there's a lack of manufacturing to build the technology that they can then adopt.
Yep.
So one of the key things that we see is there isn't a manufacturing support base around robotics companies. That needs to grow, that needs to be there, cost effective, attractive to them that they can use it as their supply chain, get the component parts they need. We've heard from semiconductors as well today, so that they can build these robotic devices cost effectively for the UK adoption into our businesses. Yep. So it's been a mixed bag in terms of successes, I would say.
Yeah, no, I think, that's fair to say. Brilliant. James, I'm going to ask what Ocado's take on all of this is. You know, a British success story, a highly, a growing and a highly innovative company. What is it about the UK that kind of keeps you here, I guess? And is there anything that you're particularly pressing for from government and wider industry?
I'm not sure there's anything that we're particularly pressing for. I think, yeah, you're right. Ocado Tech has been has been successful, I guess, in crossing that chasm. I think one of the key successes in that was in realizing the value of our technology. So I guess a lot of people still think of Ocado as just a pure retailer, I think. And that's why in my intro I kind of mentioned, hey, by the way, I'm part of Ocado Technology. And I think one of the things we did well was to realize the value of the tech in itself, right? So Ocado as a retailer, we built our own stuff because we realized the stuff out there wasn't good enough. And we built our own automation technology, we built our own software, optimization systems. And then we realized that the tech itself had its own value. And then we looked globally, right? So we looked to, pretty aggressively, had a very expansive vision to bring it to other retailers. And we remodeled the company, in fact, to kind of make that happen. And I guess all I could do is encourage other companies to think likewise, right? Just because we are, being UK based has its advantage, of course, but the size of the market has some limits, right? So if you want anything to work economically, particularly in the space of robotics, where designing robotic systems is expensive still, you need scale, I think, to make it work. So you need to have that vision to push it globally.
Sure. No, I guess that approach sounds unconventional at first, but it makes a lot of sense. And you're right, you don't hear of too many companies kind of taking that approach. No, very interesting. David, I'm just going to ask the final kind of question of this final section. So regulation will be an important part of this puzzle as we look to drive productivity through these technologies. So obviously, the government's recent announcement about the creation of a regulatory innovation office that will have a focus on connected and autonomous technologies is, I guess, music to your ears. Is that fair to say? And are you kind of optimistic about that? And the kind of challenges it should address?
Yeah, and we saw, and if we wind back on adoption of technology and automation from a government perspective and regulation perspective, hopefully a lot of people have seen or followed what was initially Ofcom's cloud market review and now referred to the CMA in terms of concerns around anti-competitive behaviours from cloud providers. We've been involved in that, investigated, if you want to use the negative phrase, given our Red Hat business, and we run a marketplace with that and have a hybrid cloud infrastructure IaaS business as part of that. So we're involved in that exercise, and that's opened up my eyes. I've led for IBM UK the exercise primarily with the CMA around their primary concerns, which is around anti-competitive behaviours, cloud committed spends, barriers to entry to multi-cloud architectures, etc. But what's happened as a result is that the CMA have learned a lot about how the UK cloud infrastructure actually works. So it's been a kind of consequential outcome is after hundreds of questions and hundreds of hours of interviews, they have gleaned all of this information about how our infrastructure actually works, which is now necessary if you think about AI and automation. It's going to get deployed through a cloud infrastructure. So understanding how that works is absolutely critical. There was a risk, and it's not over yet, so there was and is a risk of being a little bit too heavy on regulation around technology, whatever it happens to be. But my experience, and we can share this even though it's still ongoing, has been quite pleasantly surprised at the discipline that has been around not encouraging regulation too quickly. And an understanding, again, that technology is moving so quickly that to regulate it is, you could just suffocate it before it's even had the chance to actually give any value out in the first place. And actually, again, even though the cloud services market review is ongoing, you may have noticed, and I'm in the Cloud Council with techUK, so it's a bit of a hobby topic for me. One of the topics was around egress fees of the hyperscalers. If you wanted to move to different cloud provider, was one of the hot topics. We're not finished in the investigation, and all the hyperscalers, AWS, Azure, and GCP, have now cancelled their egress fees earlier this year. I don't think that would have happened if the CMA were not investigating. But it's not even finished yet, so there was no suggestion that there's going to be a regulation around it. But in fact, we've now sort of self-policed our way through rather than bringing regulations in. And I think that's a really positive. Like I said, it can be very easy for the CMA to come in or other influences from DCIT or other places, given the fact that Microsoft and AWS are very dominant in the cloud industry to really just suffocate with regulation. But they've held back. They've been quite mature about it and understood that there's different ways to solve these problems. So I think that's a good example of what I think is really good learning. And I'd like to see, as it closes, it's a long way to go yet into next summer, to see from CMA back to DCIT, and it was mentioned earlier in the semiconductor panel about the experiences from DCIT coming back out to the industry, so that we learn from that, and hopefully we won't lose the people from DCIT who've learned all these great insights from all these interviews.
Sure. No, that makes a lot of sense. Brilliant. Well, I'm just going to ask our panelists in a sentence or two to kind of sum up their key take-home message for industry, in particular, when it comes to the development and adoption of these technologies. So maybe, James, I'll start with you.
I don't know, this may be somewhat off topic, but I guess I just want to mention very briefly one topic, which is that we talked a lot about the improving productivity through robotics itself, but there's also the productivity of producing robotics. So that's one of the bits I'm most excited about, actually, is the barrier for entry for developing new robotic systems is dropping all the time, particularly with generative ML, and that is the bit I'm personally most excited by now.
Sure, thanks. David.
Take away in a sentence, I think there's too many articles in the media that are threatening automation, is threatening our jobs and threatens our economy. I've read one too many of those, and they were interesting at the start, but now they're really getting quite boring. I think we need to do more to try and drown that noise. Again, techUK do a lot to push that message out. I don't think there's enough that we could do, because the opportunities that automation brings far outweighs any risks of what it does to current life.
Sure, thanks.
Just to add on to your point as well, I think, you know, as humans, it's human-like to be scared of what the future might look like. I think when it comes to robotics, the only thing that we know is what we see in movies or what we see in articles that robots are gonna, you know. So it's looking at, okay, if you're an individual, what can you actually do to change the mindset or your mindset on how you can look at robotics not as something that's bad, but something that's actually good. And then since then the government can be able to pick that up, because how can you expect the government to drive for robotics if the industry or the academics or the stakeholders like yourself are not changing your own mindset, and you want the government to pick that up. So it's up to you, individuals, to change that mindset yourself.
Thank you. Steve?
I think I'd make two comments briefly. I welcome the fact that it's in the industrial strategy, that robotics and automation to drive productivity, absolutely the right thing to do. We also need to make a decision whether we want to be a manufacturer of robotics or a consumer, because that will drive a lot of the activity that we see in the UK. Yeah. If we decide we want to be producers, then let's clear the pathways to allow that to happen right the way through, from our youngest school children through to students in universities, spin outs, entrepreneurs, and on to scaled up companies like James and Ocado there. So I think that's really, really important, and we must do that. In terms of your comment there, Agnes, about we all have a responsibility to make robotics less scary. Yeah. Absolutely. So I can honestly say that since I got a robotic lawnmower, I haven't been made redundant by my wife. I still have a job in the house, so it's not that scary.
Great. It's a nice optimistic note to end on, I think. And just to mention that our upcoming robotics and automation sprint campaign in Q1, Q2 of next year will absolutely focus on all these issues, painting a positive picture for the future of these technologies in the UK across a wide range of sectors. And if you're keen to get involved in that, as I said, please visit our innovation hub, email me, rory.daniels@techuk.org, or find me on LinkedIn at rorydaniels28. Amazing. Well, I'd like to thank our four fantastic speakers for closing off today's session, and then invite Laura to the stage, my colleague. So thank you.
Hop very quickly up to the lectern, because I'm not one to stand between a very patient audience and a good glass of wine that is waiting for you outside. So I'll just keep my closing remarks short. But what has struck me today throughout all of the panel discussions that we've been having, through talking to our members and audience in the networking breaks, is just how formidable the people, you guys who are working in the UK tech sector are. We're not short of great innovations or great ideas here in the UK. The challenge we have tried to discuss today through the Innovation Summit is how we're getting the deployment of those great innovations right, so it has the benefit for UK society, the economy, and of course, the planet. I hope today, through the conversations that we've had with UK governments, through highlighting best practice with panels like these today, and also through key policy interventions such as discussing the industrial strategy, we're starting to show how we can do this and how techUK can help. I'd like to finish by saying thank you to our sponsors, of course, KR Data, KNOS and Workday, and also for the fantastic companies that have been in rooms 3 and 4 with headsets and technologies ready for you to trial. I hope all of you have tried it. There is still a few out there if you want to have a glass of wine and get in a headset. I'm sure there's an opportunity to do that. And then I'd also like to say thank you to all of you for coming along to this event today and for making it so great. Let's go get a glass of wine.